Hi everybody, hope you're all well. It's me, Sam, or Firestorm, depending on how you know me. So this is a review slash sort of thoughts video on the Eternals, Marvel's most latest film in ongoing attempt to take over the cinematic world. Because let's be honest, at the moment, or at least within the last couple of years, Marvel has practically been the only thing within the cinema that people have kind of been interested in and wanting to go and see. In many ways, Marvel is practically the one of the few things in cinema that is almost original, that isn't a remake or a remaster or a sequel of something that came out 10,000 years ago. So ultimately, it's the only thing in many ways that is still original within the concept, within the content, that it is not something that's already existing, has been remade, sequeled, remastered, whatever. So anyway, Marvel, The Eternals. Okay, so this film, I know this film's been a bit of a hit and miss. It's been very hit and miss for people. On one side, there are people that are really liking it. On the other side, we've got people that just simply hate it. Now, I think in a way, I think the problem for some people that don't like it is that unlike other Marvel films, this film, it's not a stereotypical action film, if you will. It doesn't have that same Marvel ring. It isn't, like Tony Stark developing the Iron Man suit for the first time, or Thor fighting a load of frost giants. It's not a film that is heavily using a character trope, if you will. It's an origin story in many ways, because it not only is it telling us the origin of the universe itself, it's also giving us origins for a lot of things that crop up later in the Marvel universe. I mean, yes, you have to take into account that this story is telling a story that spans 5,000 years, if not more. And at the heart of it all, yes, we may have the Eternals, but we also have the Celestials. Now, obviously, with the Eternals being a group of super beings that are effectively sent to Earth to kill off a group of creatures that are known as the Deviants, that are basically destroying life, and they are basically sent there on orders by the Celestials. Now, the Eternals, the name heavily implying that they are immortal. These are immortal beings that have different varieties of powers. You have ones that have abilities similar to Superman. You have ones that have abilities to do illusions. Ones that have abilities to like run really, really, really fast, like Flash. And ultimately each one represents sort of part of a team. When they're all together, the idea is they can just, easily beat these deviants, which are effectively sort of alien wolf-like monsters that eat all living things. Now, the idea is the Eternals, once they accomplished their mission, once they killed all the deviants, they were supposed to move on, but they were never told to move on. And to sort of skip it a bit, really, to give you the end game, spoilers if you haven't seen the film yet, it basically turns out that everything's a lie. It sort of turns out that the Eternals were designed. They're not actually real, I suppose you could say. They're almost like artificial beings that were designed and built by the Celestials, and their entire goal, their entire mission, yes, is to kill the Deviants. But the Deviants were the original creations. The Deviants were created by the Celestials first, before the Eternals. Now, the reason for this is because, effectively, we really jump into this. We jump into the sort of nitty gritty of this whole film and what this film is doing. is it is basically saying that yes, the Celestials created the universe. They created life itself. However, the Celestials' natural life path, if you will, is that a celestial seed is planted in a planet, and then over 10,000 years or more, it will absorb energy, the energy of life, effectively grow, 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 and eventually a new celestial is born. And in doing so, this new celestial will basically rip apart the planet as if being born from an egg. And then, boom, a new celestial is born into the universe. Now, in a lot of ways, the Celestials aren't evil. They're not really a villain. In a sense, in this film, there is no villain. You have a group of immortal beings who, after learning the truth that, you know, we've basically been around for a lot longer, we've had our memories wiped many, many times, and then sent to different planets. And, we fight the deviants that were originally developed by the Celestials, and that's because the Celestials lost control of them. After they destroy the deviants, they basically hang around whatever planet they're on for about 10,000 years, give or take. When there's enough energy gathered, they leave. Newborn Celestial, boom, rips out the planet. Planet destroyed, all life killed. New Celestial in the universe. And it isn't so much the fact that, in a sense, yes, they do feel somewhat betrayed, but at the same time, they are left to question themselves. They simply have to ask themselves, do we A, do what we have been doing since we were created, who knows how long ago, could be 100,000 years, could be 1,000,000 years that we've been doing this. So, do we A, just do what we've always done, let Earth be destroyed, let the Celestial be born, have our memories wiped, and then just do it all over again? Or B, do we protect the planet we've come to love? Do we deny the Celestials' orders? Do we stop a Celestial from being born? Do we kill a Celestial? Now, this leads the group to split. On one half, you've got the half the group who are like, no, we were designed, if you will, to do this. We serve the Celestials. So they basically go, no, we're not going to do anything. We'll let this Celestial be born and destroy Earth. The other half of the group, no, we want to stop it. We want to protect this planet. So ultimately it ends in them fighting, and eventually they manage to sort of kill the Celestial. And then the Celestial that they basically worked for, if you will, sort of takes them off and says, I'll spare Earth, but you will be judged for what you have done. Now, the thing is about this film is at the end of the film, minus the end credits, I'm not going to talk about the end credits too much, but the thing is, by the end of the film, you now have effectively a giant stone Celestial half emerged from the earth. You've sort of got one of its hands and a bit of it, like half its head. So how is that going to change things? I mean, now that we know that potentially every planet out there with life on it has a Celestial growing inside of it, that's interesting. I mean, this film really opens up the door for a lot of the Marvel mythology, if you will. It gives us a lot of information on Marvel's history. I do find the concepts of these Celestials very, very interesting. I mean, these are nigh in omnipotent immortal beings that appear to be potentially, I believe, maybe fighting a war. Because here's the thing, one of the things I noticed was that one of the main Celestial, I forget his name, the huge big red guy with 6 eyes, one of the things I noticed was that he appears to be injured. Like, when you see him sort of later on in the film near the end, by this point, obviously it's been like 7,000 years. When you see him again, he looks like he's injured. It appears he's got bits missing from his body. So I am rather curious as to whether or not the Celestials are fighting some sort of war. Now, are they fighting each other, or are they fighting Galactus? because from what little I know about Galactus, I believe he's possibly one of the few Marvel beings that has the ability to take on a Celestial, because he's very much a godlike being himself, so technically he could potentially take on a Celestial. So I'm curious if the Celestials themselves are secretly fighting a war against Galactus. It's just very interesting. It's the mythology side that really interests me about all this. The fact that we have this new information, the fact that we have Celestials now, we know about them, and we effectively understand what they are to a certain degree. Now, quickly moving on to the end credit scene, at least one of them I want to talk about. Now, the first one effectively sets up Thanos' brother, which is brilliant, because again, he's been sort of rumoured, so bringing in Thanos' brother is a lot. Means a lot, is very important. Don't know how it's important, because I don't really know a lot about the extended Marvel universe, but I know it's important. So anyway, Thanos' brother comes into it. But, to go back to the film, because I'm just going to cover different subjects here, but why are people hating the film? Why are people hating on this film? Personally, as I said, I think it's because a lot of people, simply put, cannot, I don't think they can, how can I put this? Now, I don't want to sound insulting, you know, I'm not saying I'm a bloody genius, because I'm certainly not, but is it because people can't process the film? Is it sort of like, because it's so story-driven, that it's more about the characters and their history and the Celestials' history, that people aren't entertained because they just want to watch a film with big explosions and fights? I mean, there is some fights in it, but ultimately it's a story about, you could say it's a story about questioning your own humanity. And it's a very in-depth story. Now, there could be potentially some people hating on it because they would class it as woke, because, you know, it's a very diverse cast, and you do have, you know, I wouldn't really call it a stereotypical gay relationship, but there is a character in there who is gay, but again, you could argue that perhaps this is just him embracing another element of life because he's thousands and thousands of years old. Who knows? But whether or not you want to argue if it's woke is debatable, because it really isn't. Yes, it's a diverse cast, but there's nothing wrong with a diverse cast. It deals with humanity, and I think that is why it's a hard pill to swallow in some respects, because it isn't a film about beating the villain. It's not a film about, you know, fighting a god. It's not a film about coming together with a big group of heroes and fighting an army in New York City. It's a film about choice. It's about being immortal. It's about living forever, living with your choices and your consequences, and also having to accept the fact that everything you thought you knew wasn't true. You know, one of the things that the Celestials forbid the Eternals from doing while they were on Earth was interfering with humans, specifically interfering with, shall we say, the grand design of humans. I mean, they were on Earth for about 7,000 years, and it turns out that through the centuries and thousands of years they were there, the Celestials bore witness to a lot of humanity's, like, worst moments. You know, they witnessed, for example, there's a bit where you see them basically witnessing the fall of the Aztec Empire by the Spanish conquistadors in the mid-15th century, and they're sort of watching this whole city being burned and destroyed, and they do end up getting into a huge big argument over it, about getting involved and stopping it, and eventually one of them does decide to get involved, and he uses his mind control powers to basically take over the minds of everybody and tell them all to leave and stop killing each other. and then eventually that causes them to sort of split up for about 600 years or so. The interesting thing as well is on that side, you, as I said, you have these immortal beings who have the ability. They could have easily, controlled, manipulated, influenced the path of humanity, but they weren't allowed to. And in many ways, that is another element of the film that you have to take into account. A good example is the character Sprite. Out of all the Celestials, she basically is, I suppose you could say she's in the body of a, not really a child, I'd say more like, I think she's supposed to be like a young teenager, like maybe 14 years old, if I were to guess. And in many ways, she is quite, I don't know how to put it, she's very much not at peace with herself. I mean, her abilities are illusions. She can create illusions. And in many ways, she often does illusions to make herself appear as an adult. And, her character, her whole concept, she is, in a sense, an immortal child. She's never grown up. She's never been able to experience life. And a big part of her character, spoiler warning, is that eventually, at the end of the film, she's made human by one of the Eternals who sort of has the ability to change matter, I believe, and she's given the gift of mortality because that's what she wants. She wants to grow up. She wants to experience life, and she's not really able to do that because she's basically got the body of a young 13-14-year-old and has done for like 7,000 years. So, in a lot of ways, it's also just the film itself is also discussing the aspect of immortality and how immortality could really be a curse. Let's look at it this way. You imagine being, in your 30s, like right now, me, I'm 32 years old. So you imagine being 32 years old, and all of a sudden, you just suddenly are gifted immortality. Fine, at 32 years old, if you were to think about it, yeah, you're an adult. Really, you're not restricted. There's nothing you can't do, within the grounds of the law when it comes to like age-wise. You can drive, you can drink beer, you can get a job. There's loads of stuff you could do because you're an adult. But imagine being 12 and suddenly you wake up one day and you've been given immortality. You're never going to age. You're always going to be 12. And it doesn't matter if in 1,000 years' time you may well be physically 12 years old, but mentally you are more intelligent, more experienced, more knowledgeable than somebody in the 50s because you've lived, say, 1,000 years. But nobody would really take you seriously, and it would be very difficult to live an immortal life if you were immortally a 12-year-old, because you wouldn't be able to have your own life. I mean, how would you be able to live buy a house? So ultimately, you could argue that the Eternals is also about the curse and the gift of immortality. I think this film is introducing us a lot to that. It is telling a narrative about immortality. It isn't just about, Marvel Universe and the Celestials and the creation of the universe. It's about a group of beings who are immortal and who are struggling in a sense with their eternal existence. So I generally think, really, to sort of end this on a few notes, so one thing I want to talk about, so the Celestials themselves, they're not a villain. They're effectively just following their natural life cycle. Obviously, whether or not, I'm assuming, no, Celestials can die. Yes, they can die, because you do see a dead Celestial in the second Guardians of the Galaxy film. So yes, they can die, but however long they live for is a mystery. It could be millions and millions and millions and millions and even billions of years. But if their natural sort of life cycle is effectively that they, you know, are planted as a seed in a planet, absorb energy over 10,000 or so years, then boom, burst out, and hey, celestial. Again, that's just their natural life cycle. So, in many ways, for once, we don't have a villain in this film. We just have a very powerful group of beings who are beyond our understanding, and they're just following their natural life cycle. So yeah, it's definitely not a villain. Right, but to end this sort of thoughts video review, I did enjoy Eternals. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm generally looking forward to seeing how this is going to lead on into the future. I'm looking forward to seeing more Celestials. And yeah, that's about it, because I could talk all night. But anyway, thank you for watching this sort of thoughts video on the Eternals. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about the film. And have a great day. Thanks for watching. Peace out, everybody.